Chapter 11. Leopardfur glanced up at the night sky. Her clanmates were sleeping. Soft snores rose from the dens. Clouds hid the moon. Rain was on its way, and the river would be swollen by morning. She felt a prickle of frustration. In the days since she'd rescued Mosspelt, she hadn't found the right opportunity to speak with Crookedstar about reclaiming RiverClan's territory. Perhaps it was better this way. He hadn't taken her advice before. She crossed the clearing, padding away from the medicine den where she'd peeked in to check on Mosspelt. The queen had been sleeping, Frogleap dozing beside her nest, his chin resting on the side. Mudfur had been hardly visible in the shadows, but she'd seen his eyes glint as he looked up at her from his herbs and blinked softly at her. She'd nodded in return and slipped out, not wanting to disturb Mosspelt's rest. Now she checked the camp, padding quietly along the walls, her mouth open as she tasted the air for anything unusual. She'd have to remember to organize a patrol to fetch fresh bedding for the nursery, and to clear out any cobwebs and dusty reeds there, making it ready for Mosspelt. It would be good to have kits in camp once more, even if they reminded her that Frogleap loved Mosspelt now. Greypool nodded at her as she neared the entrance. The dark gray she-cat, sitting guard with Silverstream, was looking old, her pelt flecked with lighter gray hairs. Was it time she moved to the Elder's Den? Leopardfur decided she'd let the warrior decide for herself, and nodded in return. Silverstream got to her paws as Leopardfur reached them.
"You should get some rest," she told Leopardfur. "You've been awake since before dawn. I just want to check outside."
Leopardfur knew she slept better when she felt sure the camp was safe.
"Crookedstar's out there,"
Greypool told her. Leopardfur's ears pricked with surprise. She'd thought he was asleep in his den.
"Has he been there long?"
Silverstream glanced through the tunnel.
"Not long,"
she mewed.
"He said he wanted to stretch his legs."
Leopardfur ducked through the reed tunnel, followed the grass path beyond, and looked around. Crookedstar was sitting at the edge of the river. It flowed past him, the surface smooth and dark. He turned as she approached him, his green eyes gleaming like minnow pools. "Hey, Leopardfur."
"Hi."
She sat beside him and gazed across the river, comforted by its soft swirl and whisper. It was a sound she'd heard since she was born, and even now it carried with it the gentle breathing of her nestmates and the steady beating of Shimmerpelt's heart.
"I thought you were asleep."
She caught his eye. Would this be a good time to discuss ShadowClan?
"Is something keeping you awake?"
No. He watched the river. Mosspelt is safe. Our clanmates have full bellies. He paused. Is something keeping you awake? She hesitated. She wouldn't find a better time than this to talk to Crookedstar. She glanced at him.
"How long will the clan have full bellies?"
He stiffened, avoiding the question. Are you worried about Leaf Bear?
"I'd be less worried if we weren't sharing our hunting grounds with ShadowClan."
He didn't look at her. I'm not going back on the agreement I made, he mewed softly.
"But you made it with Brokenstar," she reminded him. "And now he's gone."
We have peace. I don't want to threaten it.
"But it's getting harder to fill the fresh kill pile every day," she told him.
Is that ShadowClan's fault? He mewed. They're hopeless fishers. They barely take more than 3 or 4 trout in a moon. And the only land prey they take is fur prey. They leave feather prey alone.
"They might not hunt it," Leopardfur pressed, "but they scare it away. They're clumsy hunters. They frighten every bird in the forest just to catch a single mouse. And when they catch those 3 or 4 trout, they splash about so much they drive every other fish away."
Perhaps it's just the price of peace, Crookedstar murmured. Leopardfur looked at him.
"Our land is slowly being stolen," she mewed. ThunderClan has claimed Sunning Rocks, and ShadowClan uses our territory like they own it. What you call peace, the other clans will call weakness. Before long, they'll be claiming more.
We'll cross that river if we come to it. Crookedstar was still gazing across the water. How could he be so calm? Didn't he realize the danger?
If we make a stand now, we might never even reach that river.
He turned his head. His round eyes glittered in the darkness. And what if we make a stand now and find ourselves at war?
Then we fight,
she mewed urgently. And what if we lose? He asked. Do you think the other clans won't call us weak then? Do you think they'd be happy to stop at stealing Sunning Rocks and claiming hunting rights? We might lose even more.
Then we mustn't lose.
He was declaring defeat even before he'd tried to win. You can't guarantee that. He turned away again. And I'm not willing to take the risk. It's too great.
Big risks come with big rewards, she pressed.
And even bigger dangers.
His shoulders were stiff, and she knew she was wasting her breath. It wasn't fair to River Clan. They were living like prey, too frightened to leave their burrow in case they were eaten, and she feared that as long as Crookedstar was leader, nothing would ever change. It had rained in the night, and the river was high. Leopardfur signaled to Rippleclaw with her tail. Check that the two-leg is gone, she ordered. Take Blackclaw with you, and read— She stopped as Whiteclaw raced into camp, his pelt wet from the rain, which was still falling. Nightpelt's here, he puffed. He wants to speak with Crookedstar. Her pelt prickled with alarm as the brown tom skidded to a halt in front of her. He was scanning the clearing. Is Crookedstar here? As he spoke, the River Clan leader pushed through the mossy entrance of his den.
Where is he?
I left him beside the bulrushes with Emberdawn and Beetlenose, Whiteclaw told him. He was waiting for us at the border and asked to be escorted to the camp.
Did he say why? Crookedstar's eyes glittered with curiosity.
No.
Whiteclaw shifted his paws excitedly.
He said he could only tell you. Will you speak to him?
Yes.
As Crookedstar began to follow the brown tom across the clearing, Leopardfur whisked her tail. Rippleclaw could pick his own patrol. Take whoever you like, she told him. She hurried after Crookedstar, calling back over her shoulder. But stay clear of the two-leg, if it's still there. It's dangerous. She caught up to Crookedstar as he ducked out of camp and fell in beside him. Can I join you?
Yes.
He glanced at her.
But when we meet Nightpelt, let me do the talking.
Okay. She felt a prickle of frustration. Would he ever trust her to behave like a true deputy? They crossed the stepping stones and headed for the bulrushes. I wonder why he's still called Nightpelt, she mewed.
Perhaps he hasn't had a chance to travel to the Moonstone.
Crookedstar slitted his eyes against the rain.
ShadowClan must be a mess if their last leader was chased out.
Leopardfur wondered what it would take for a clan to drive their leader away. Would Nightpelt tell them? Or would they have to wait to hear the gossip at the next gathering? The rain was falling harder now, seeping through Leopardfur's pelt. She flattened her ears to keep the water out. But even through the downpour, she could smell ShadowClan's stench before they reached the bend in the path. As they rounded it, Nightpelt got to his paws. His black fur was slicked against his bony frame. His yellow-green eyes seemed as bright as primroses. Emberdawn and Beetlenose flanked him. They fell back as Crookedstar approached. Nightpelt dipped his head to the River Clan leader. Thanks for meeting me. Crookedstar waved Emberdawn, Beetlenose, and Whiteclaw away with his tail. Leopardfur hung back, her ears pricked. What had brought ShadowClan's new leader here? Was he going to demand even more hunting rights? She unsheathed her claws. She knew Crookedstar was worried about how she might behave at this meeting, but some things were worth getting in trouble over. Even if her leader agreed to expand their hunting arrangement, she couldn't let that pass. The River Clan leader waited until the warriors had disappeared behind the bulrushes before he spoke.
I'm sorry to hear that ShadowClan has been suffering. Nightbelt's gaze flitted around the small clearing, as though he feared being spied on.
Now that Broken Star is gone, things will change.
Leopardfur narrowed her eyes.
Does that mean you'll hunt on your own land instead of ours?
Crooked Star sat down and folded his tail over his front paws. He seemed oblivious to the rain, though it streamed from his fur.
I hope that change will bring peace.
Leopardfur's hackles rose.
Ask him why he came.
Nightbelt's tail was twitching uneasily. Prey is more important than peace. A hungry clan is a dangerous clan. Leopardfur curled her claws into the muddy earth. Was he planning to demand more rights to RiverClan land? Crooked Star didn't move.
When Leaf Bear comes, every clan faces hunger,
he mewed.
Tell him he needs to get off our land.
Anger was pressing in Leopardfur's throat. Indeed. Nightbelt glanced to where the moor rose and disappeared into the low clouds. But Leaf Bear is many moons away, and now that Wind Clan has left, there is more hunting land to spare. Leopardfur blinked in surprise. Why hadn't she thought of that? The moorland would be prey-rich if no cat had hunted there these past moons. Why let it go to waste? Crooked Star gazed calmly at the Shadow Clan leader but didn't speak. I came here to propose an alliance, Nightbelt mewed. I realize that our hunting on your land has caused tension. I'm grateful you've allowed us to take your prey for as long as you have, but even Broken Star would have admitted that it wasn't a permanent solution. Leopardfur leaned closer. This Shadow Clan leader had sense. He went on. Now that Wind Clan is gone, we should split the moor between us. Crooked Star was quiet for a moment more. Then he spoke carefully, as though measuring his words.
What do you think ThunderClan would say?
Nightbelt shrugged. If RiverClan and Shadow Clan have an alliance, it doesn't matter what ThunderClan says.
Don't you think they'd want their share of the land?
Crooked Star mewed. Why? Nightbelt looked at him. They don't share a border with the moor. Besides, ThunderClan is not as pragmatic as us. They'd rather starve than cross a border. Leopardfur bristled.
They crossed our border, she snapped. They took Sunning Rocks.
Nightbelt glanced at her. Only because they believe Sunning Rocks belongs to them.
But it doesn't,
she began. Crooked Star silenced her with a warning look.
Sunning Rocks is our concern,
he growled. She flexed her claws but held her tongue. What do you think of Nightbelt's plan? He asked her suddenly.
Me?
She blinked in surprise. You. He stared at her expectantly. Leopardfur's pelt warmed with pride. He was actually consulting her.
I think it's a great plan.
She searched his gaze. Surely he agreed.
I think so too.
As he flicked his gaze back to Nightbelt, she felt a rush of jubilation. At last, Crooked Star was planning to expand RiverClan's territory.
Moorland prey isn't to our tastes,
Crooked Star went on.
But a hungry warrior can't be picky.
He got to his paws.
Will you start sending patrols to the moor straight away?
Not until after the gathering, Nightbelt told him. ThunderClan might oppose it.
I thought ThunderClan didn't matter as long as we were working together,
Crooked Star reminded him. They don't, Nightbelt mewed. But I want to feel them out first. If they're going to cause trouble, we should be prepared.
If you think they might cause trouble, we should hide our alliance from them, Crooked Star warned. We don't want to provoke them more than necessary.
Agreed. Nightbelt dipped his head. ThunderClan thinks our loyalty lies with them, since they helped us chase out Broken Star. It would be wise to let them think we're grateful for their help. Leopardfur swallowed back a growl. She would never put her clan in a position where it had to be grateful. Crooked Star turned to leave.
I'll send White Claw to escort you to the border,
he told Nightbelt as he padded away. As he brushed past Leopardfur, he whispered under his breath,
See?
His caught her eye.
Sometimes a leader only has to be patient.
Her belly tightened with frustration, remembering the lean, fresh-kill piles, and her clanmates' annoyance at seeing Shadow Clan warriors clumsily hunting territory that belonged to them. She supposed that being patient had worked out this time. They had their territory back now, and wind clans to split between the clans. But who knew what might have happened if they'd fought back when they should have? How much has that patience cost us? She wondered. Leopard Fur wrapped her tail tighter over her paws. The weather had turned cold in the days since the meeting with Nightbelt, and frosty air pooled in the 4 Trees hollow and reached deep into her fur. The warriors of River Clan, Thunder Clan, and Shadow Clan bunched together, and the bright full moon lit their billowing breath, the air swirling around them like cloudy water. Leopard Fur was sitting with the other deputies beside the great rock while the leaders addressed the gathering. Cinder Fur sat in Blackfoot's place. The old Shadow Clan deputy had fled with his leader. Leopard Fur eyed Cinder Fur as he gazed up at Nightbelt. Did he approve of his leader's plan to share the moor? Tiger Claw sat on her other side. The dark tabby had replaced Lionheart as ThunderClan's deputy. She shifted as warmth from his pelt reached her, unsettled by his musky ThunderClan scent. I, Nightpelt, have taken over leadership of Shadow Clan, the skinny Tom called from the top of the great rock. Tiger Claw leaned closer to Leopard Fur. I notice he still hasn't gone to the Moonstone for his name, he murmured under his breath. She eyed him suspiciously. There was amusement in his gaze, as though he thought little of Shadow Clan's new leader. She looked away. Shadow Clan was River Clan's ally now, and she didn't like the Thunder Clan deputy's insinuation that Nightpelt wasn't a true leader. Leopard Fur glanced at her clanmates, dotted among the crowd. Mosspelt's sprain had healed enough for her to join the gathering. She sat with Frogleap while Birdsong stood a few tail lengths away, among the Shadow Clan elders. Mudfur was with Spotted Leaf and Rippleclaw, Timberfur, and Shimmerpelt huddled together at the edge of the crowd, their pelts fluffed out against the cold. The whole of River Clan knew about the alliance Nightpelt had proposed. Leopard Fur knew her clanmates were excited and anxious in equal measure at the thought of hunting on Wind Clan's abandoned territory. She guessed that, like her, they were listening to hear what Thunder Clan would think of the plan. Nightpelt was still speaking. Our former leader, Broken Star, broke the warrior code, and we were forced to chase him out. No mention of our help, Tiger Claw muttered. Cinderfur glared at the Thunder Clan deputy, and Tiger Claw blinked back at him. Leopard Fur ignored the animosity sparking between the two Toms. She was more interested in the crowd. The space left by Wind Clan still felt strange, but now she felt it more as an opportunity than a loss, and pictured the great swaths of moorland that were open to River Clan's warriors. Perhaps she should organize some special training patrols. After all, River Clan cats were used to hunting fish and birds. It would do no harm to practice chasing fur prey. Would some of River Clan's hunting moves work as well on hillsides as on riverbanks and in water meadows? She went through them one by one, deciding which could be best adapted to hunting among the heather. Wind Clan must return! Blue Star's heated mew caught her attention, and she looked up sharply. The ThunderClan leader was staring angrily at Nightpelt, but it was Crooked Star who spoke. Why? Before the ThunderClan leader could answer, Nightpelt added, Sharing Wind Clan's hunting grounds will mean more food for all our kits. The forest needs 4 clans, Blue Star insisted. Just as we have 4 trees and 4 seasons, Star Clan has given us 4 clans. We must find Wind Clan as soon as possible and bring them home. They must return! 4 clans, not 3. Leopard Fur's pelt twitched uneasily as ThunderClan warriors raised their voices in support of their leader. She glanced up at the great rock as Crooked Star spoke again. Your argument is weak, Blue Star. Do we really need 4 seasons? Wouldn't you rather go without Leaf Bear and the cold and hunger it brings? Blue Star met his gaze coolly. Star Clan gave us Leaf Bear to let the land recover and prepare for New Leaf. This forest and the uplands have supported 4 clans for generations. It is not up to us to challenge Star Clan. Leopard Fur held her breath. Was Crooked Star going to press his point home? The River Clan leader stared blankly at Blue Star. He couldn't be lost for words. He'd made an agreement with ShadowClan. ThunderClan was outnumbered here. He had to speak. Bluestar was still staring at him, her blue eyes flashing angrily in the moonlight.
"Say something," Leopard Fur leaned forward, willing her leader to speak. But Crooked Star was silent. If he was going to let ThunderClan steal this chance of feeding their clan, she wasn't. "Why should we go hungry for the sake of a clan that cannot even defend its own territory?" she yowled.
Crooked Star shot her an angry look. She shot one back. Did he really expect her to stay quiet in the face of such provocation? Tigerclaw bristled beside her. "Bluestar is right!" His growl took Leopard Fur by surprise, and she drew away as he glared around at the gathered cats. "WindClan must return!" Bluestar spoke again.
"Crooked Star!"
She was still staring at the RiverClan leader, but her gaze had softened. She was reasoning with him now.
"RiverClan's hunting grounds are known for their richness. Not when ShadowClan has spent a moon scaring away our prey, and ThunderClan has claimed part of our territory as their own."
Leopard Fur trembled with indignation as Bluestar went on.
"You have the river and all the fish it contains. Why do you need extra prey?"
Leopard Fur's eyes widened as Crooked Star looked away. Wasn't he going to argue? Bluestar turned to Nightpelt.
"It was Broken Star who drove WindClan from their home. That's why ThunderClan helped you chase him out."
Leopard Fur bristled with indignation. The ThunderClan leader was reminding him of his debt to her. Surely Nightpelt wouldn't be manipulated so easily. "Very well, Bluestar," Nightpelt mewed after a moment's hesitation. "We will allow WindClan to return." Leopard Fur could hardly believe her ears. Nightpelt had betrayed their alliance at the first sign of pressure. Crooked Star hadn't even bothered to fight. He was still staring at his paws. How could these two leaders be so weak? She glared at Bluestar. Her shoulders were broader than Nightpelt's, her gaze more determined than Crooked Star's. The ThunderClan leader seemed far more powerful than either of them. She turned to look at Nightpelt, the sickly ShadowClan warrior. He'd given in so easily. Suddenly the thought occurred to her. Was it just for show? Perhaps he intended sticking to the deal he'd made with Crooked Star. After all, hadn't he and Crooked Star agreed to keep their alliance from ThunderClan's secret? Perhaps agreeing with Bluestar was his way of hiding it. Tigerclaw's mew sounded softly in her ear, disrupting her thoughts. "Are you learning from her?" She snapped her head around and glared at him. "She's impressive, isn't she?" he mewed.
"She's a bully."
"She only reasoned with them." Leopard Fur felt the ThunderClan deputy's gaze searching hers, as though he was curious. She stared back at him.
"What do you want from me?" she snapped. "Are you waiting for me to tell you how much I admire your leader?"
"No." Tigerclaw's mew was silky. "I'm just interested in why you spoke out when Crooked Star wouldn't." She let out a low hiss.
"I'm not prepared to let my clan go hungry just because ThunderClan says they should."
"I'm glad." She blinked at him.
"Why?"
"Didn't I already tell you that the clans need fresh energy?" he mewed. "I'm pleased you're living up to your promise." Her pelt prickled uneasily. A few moments ago, this Tom had openly contradicted her. Now he was encouraging her. She didn't understand.
"But I don't want WindClan to return."
"So?"
"You want them back."
"Do I?"
"You just told the gathering that Bluestar was right."
What kind of snake-tongued warrior was he? "She's my leader." Leopard Fur suddenly realized that the gathering was breaking up. Nightpelt had jumped down from the great rock, and Bluestar was already pushing her way through the crowd toward the slope that led toward ThunderClan territory. Cinderfur hurried away without saying goodbye, but Tigerclaw didn't move. He blinked at Leopard Fur. "But that doesn't mean I agree with her."
"You mean you don't want WindClan back?"
Leopard Fur was shocked. "Right now it doesn't matter what I want," he mewed. "Bluestar is my leader, and so I support whatever she decides. But if we have thoughts and opinions we keep to ourselves, where's the harm?" I want what's best for my clan, just like you do. Isn't it enough that I be loyal with my tongue and my claws? What happens in my own mind is my concern."
She frowned. She couldn't help thinking that Tiger Claw wasn't keeping his disagreement with Bluestar inside his own mind. He was telling her right now, wasn't he? A cat from outside his clan. Wasn't that disloyal? Tiger Claw was watching her carefully.
"Clearly there are times you don't agree with Crookedstar," he pointed out. "Perhaps even more than you said tonight."
Leopard Fur flinched. She couldn't exactly deny it. She'd spoken out just moments before. And yet, she couldn't admit this to a ThunderClan cat. Could she? Tiger Claw drew himself up tall.
"It's not always easy being deputy, is it? You must support your leader, but at the same time, you're your own cat. That's why your leader chose you, because you can make your own decisions. We have one paw in the present, supporting our leaders, and one paw in the future, planning for the day when we will be leader. I would only say, we understand each other, perhaps better than another cat could," he added, looking her up and down. "I would never betray your confidence. I admire you, Leopard Fur, your intelligence, your ambition. I hope that someday we will work together as leaders."
I hope so, too. Being leader was all she'd ever wanted, but it seemed a horrible thing to hope for. It meant that Crookedstar would have to die. And it shamed her in a way that Tiger Claw could see her ambition so clearly. She got to her paws. I should go. Her clanmates were heading for the slope.
"I won't always be deputy, and neither will you," Tiger Claw purred silkily. "The day will come when our clans will look to us for leadership, and I believe we can do it, Leopardstar. We just have to be ready. We can bring change for the first time in moons."
Leopardstar. Since she was a tiny kit, Leopard Fur had imagined how her leader name would sound, but this was the first time another cat had spoken it aloud. It sounded beautiful. So beautiful that it shamed her a little. "Crookedstar is my leader." She began to head away, but Tiger Claw blocked her path.
"Change is frightening."
His mew was gentle but insistent.
"But you have the courage of your convictions. The clans waste so much time fighting for the wrong things. I know you see that too."
She pushed past him, but he followed.
"You love your clan, that's obvious. But you can see its weaknesses. You know how to make it better. You just haven't been given the chance yet. If we could plan together."
"My clanmates are leaving." She raced after them, her pelt twitching uncomfortably. As she reached the slope, she glanced back and saw Tiger Claw standing alone in the empty clearing. The ThunderClan warrior had unsettled her. Plan together? There was something treacherous about his words. Should she tell her true thoughts to this ThunderClan deputy, but not her own leader? Surely he was encouraging her to break the warrior code. And yet, she realized, as she turned the conversation over in her mind, he hadn't. He'd told her to put her clan first. If we have our own thoughts and opinions, where's the harm? That was true, wasn't it? He was right. She truly believed that the clans needed change, and she would be leader one day. What was wrong with admitting that and thinking about it now? Was it a crime to have her own dreams for RiverClan? What made Crookedstar's ideas right and her ideas wrong? Tiger Claw was right, she realized, as she headed back to camp. Believing in change wasn't disloyal. Nothing was disloyal, so long as she had her clan's best interests at heart. Chapter 12. The sky was growing pale. It would be dawn soon. The clouds were clearing, and Leopard Fur could tell it would be a fine day. She lifted her face to the wind.
It tugged her pelt and swished through the reeds. She should return to camp, but she paused at the river's edge and looked out across the water. She'd crept out before dawn and made a circuit of the island to check that no fox, dog, or two-leg had come close. She wanted to see how the river was running. In the 2 days since the gathering, it had rained hard, and the river was swollen and running fast. Fishing would be dangerous in such strong currents, and Leopard Fur hoped that the day's hunting patrols would be able to find enough prey in the forest and along the shore. Her thoughts flitted back to the gathering. Blue Star had said that Wind Clan must be found and brought home, and that no clan should hunt in their territory. Crooked Star's silence, neither agreeing nor disagreeing with the Thunder Clan leader's demand, still clawed at her belly. Nightpelt had said that Shadow Clan would allow Wind Clan to return. How could the two leaders give in to Thunder Clan's demands so easily? They outnumbered them. Crooked Star had let Leopard Fur send only one patrol to the moor. While he'd agreed that River Clan should maintain their right to hunt there, he'd ordered the patrol to take only 1 or 2 pieces of prey. It was as though he felt ashamed, and his furtiveness rubbed her fur the wrong way. Thunder Clan could talk about bringing Wind Clan back, but until they did, the moor was open territory as far as Leopard Fur was concerned. A leaf twirled past Leopard Fur's paws, carried on the water, and she grabbed for it, unable to resist. She hooked it out easily and dropped it on the bank. If it were up to her, she'd have sent 3 patrols to Wind Clan's abandoned territory every day. The moor hadn't been hunted for moons. It was foolish not to make the most of such rich land, especially when it sat right on River Clan's border. She'd have told them to leave scent markers, too. She wanted River Clan to show that the other clans couldn't tell them what to do. And if their markers happened to discourage Wind Clan from returning, all the better. The scrawny rabbit chasers hadn't had the courage to fight for their land when Broken Star claimed hunting rights. Why would they fight for it now? She turned, her tail flicking behind her, and headed back to camp, deciding on the day's patrols. She'd send out 3, 1 to mark the Thunder Clan border, 2 more to hunt in the woods. Timberfur could lead the border patrol, and Cedarpelt could. She ducked into camp, distracted from her thoughts by Mudfur, who was pacing beside the entrance. His eyes were bright with worry. "Where have you been?" "Checking the river." Was something wrong? "Crooked Star's sick," he mewed. "Greypool found him in his den. He has a fever and is barely making any sense." Leopard Fur's paws pricked anxiously. "Have you moved him to the medicine den?" "Yes," Mudfur told her. "I've given him feverfew and oak leaf, but we'll have to wait to see if it brings his fever down." "Is it white cough?" "Not as far as I can tell." Mudfur flicked his tail uneasily. "But his throat looks a little red. He needs rest and herbs. You're going to have to take charge of the clan while he recovers." Take charge? Excitement sparked in her fur. She'd finally get a chance to put her own ideas into practice. Mudfur narrowed his eyes. Had she looked too eager? "Until he recovers," he mewed. "I'll do my best," she mewed quickly. "Take good care of him. It's important he recovers quickly." Mudfur looked reassured. "I'll need fresh herbs," he mewed. "Can you send a patrol to collect some tansy, if they can find it? And mallow?" "Of course." Leopardfur began to turn toward the warrior's den, but Mudfur hadn't finished. "I saw you talking with Tiger Claw at the gathering." Why mention that now? It had been 2 days since they were at 4 Trees, and there were more important things to worry about now. She blinked at him. "We're both deputies," she told him. "Of course we'd talk." "Even after the leaders had argued?" "Surely that makes it more important for the deputies to talk." Mudfur stared at her for a moment. He looked wary. Leopardfur forced her pelt to stay smooth. There was no way he could have overheard their conversation. "I had a dream last night," he mewed. "It disturbed me." "What about?" Tiger Claw was holding a fish in his jaws. It was struggling, but it couldn't escape. Mudfur shifted his paws. "He wants power, and he'll do anything to get it. You should be careful of him."
Leopardfur swished her tail. "Why wouldn't I be careful? He belongs to another clan."
"Yes," Mudfur agreed. "And it's the clan that stole Sunning Rocks."
Leopardfur felt irritated by the reminder. Did he think she didn't know that? Besides, Mudfur had turned his back on being a warrior and made it clear he had no interest in clan affairs. "I thought you didn't believe in petty quarrels between clans."
"But you do?" Mudfur's eyes rounded. "And I worry about you."
"I'm fine." She glanced around the clearing. Timberfur was pacing outside the warrior's den while Ottersplash peered through the reed tunnel. Beetlenose was picking through the stiff prey left on the freshkill pile. They were restless. "I need to organize the patrols." She left her father, her thoughts darting like fish. Of course she'd be careful of Tiger Claw. His ambition was obvious, but it was driven by the desire to protect his clan. Was that wrong? She stopped in the clearing and shook out her pelt. Of course it wasn't. It was natural. Mudfur worried too much. She'd sent Timberfur with a patrol to check the ThunderClan border. Cedarpelt had taken Ottersplash, Lake Shine, Stonefur, and Shadepaw to hunt birds along the shore. She would lead the third patrol. "Blackclaw," she called to the lean, smoky black Tom. "I'm taking a patrol onto the moor," she told him. "I want you to come with me, and bring Heavypaw." She nodded to Frogleap and Beetlenose. "You too, with Whiteclaw and Sedge Creek." She flicked her tail, and they hurried across the clearing to join her as she padded toward the entrance. Frogleap looked worried. "Will Crookedstar be okay with us hunting on WindClan territory?" "WindClan has left," she told him. "Why shouldn't we hunt there?" Frogleap looked wary. "But Bluestar said at the gathering," Leopardfur cut him off. "Is Bluestar your leader?" "No, but Crookedstar." "Crookedstar is sick," Leopardfur told him sharply. "And I think we need to show ThunderClan that they don't decide what other clans can and cannot do." Heavypaw glanced anxiously at his mentor. "Is Leopardfur our leader now?" he whispered. "Until Crookedstar recovers," Blackclaw told him. Whiteclaw padded eagerly around them. "Let's catch as much prey as we can," he mewed, "before WindClan returns." "If they return," Leopardfur mewed. Sedge Creek glanced toward the moor, which looked golden in the leaf-bare sunshine. "ThunderClan said they must be found." "ThunderClan can look for them if they want," Leopardfur mewed. "But it'll be a long leaf bear, and after losing so much prey to ShadowClan and that two-leg, we need to fill our bellies however we can." She glanced around the patrol. Frogleap still looked unconvinced, and Beetlenose's tail was twitching. They needed reassuring. "Of course I'd rather not eat more prey," she mewed. "More prey is all fur and bone. But I won't let the clan starve while perfectly good land goes unhunted." She headed through the tunnel, ducking out into bright sunlight. Screwing up her eyes, she felt a pelt brush hers. Whiteclaw had fallen in beside her. "Do you think ShadowClan will be hunting on WindClan land too?" he asked. "Maybe." Nightpelt had said they would share the moor, before he'd backed down at the gathering. She sniffed. "But ShadowClan doesn't interest me. I only care about feeding my own clan." Whiteclaw puffed out his chest. "The moor's probably stuffed with prey," he mewed. "I bet we'll be able to feed the whole clan from a single hunt." The young Tom suddenly reminded her of Sunfish. Leopardfur purred at him, grateful for his enthusiasm. The stepping stones had disappeared beneath the surging water, so they had to swim across. They headed upstream to cross the river where it was smoother and easier to navigate. At the WindClan border, Leopardfur paused. There was barely any scent left. WindClan's markers had been washed away, and the scent of heather was stronger than Warrior's scent now. As she crossed the border, Blackclaw scanned the sky. "Watch out for hawks," he told Heavypaw. "With WindClan gone, they'll be used to having the moor to themselves." He glanced at his apprentice and added, "They might mistake you for a meal." Heavypaw's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Blackclaw told him solemnly. Beetlenose winked at the warrior and added, "Don't worry, Heavypaw. A hawk would spit you out after the first bite," he teased. "You taste like fish." Heavypaw's ears were twitching nervously. Don't hawks like fish?
Not furry fish, Beetlenose mewed. Sedge Creek moved closer to the young Tom.
Don't take any notice of them, she mewed. They're just teasing.
Blackclaw purred. I promise I won't let a hawk take you, he mewed, adding mischievously, not after I've spent so long training you. Leopardfur blinked reassuringly at Heavypaw.
You'll be safe as long as you stick with us.
She felt a fresh rush of affection for her clan, and her fierce urge to protect them pressed harder in her chest. As the rest of the patrol crossed the border, Whiteclaw hurried ahead.
Stay close,
Leopardfur called him back. Blackclaw might only have been teasing Heavypaw about hawks, but they were on territory that hadn't been patrolled for moons. Who knew what was hiding in the heather? Whiteclaw dropped back and fell in beside Sedge Creek, and Leopardfur pulled into the lead. If there were dangers here, she would be the first to meet them. As the land began to slope upward, the grass beneath her paws grew coarser, the terrain rougher. A swath of heather lay ahead, and she ducked through a passage between the bushes, the patrol falling into single file behind her. As the rough branches closed over her head, she opened her mouth to taste the air. Peat scent bathed her tongue. It smelled sour after the sharp, fresh scents of the river, but if WindClan never returned and they were to hunt this territory regularly, RiverClan would have to get used to the new flavors. She stopped and marked a bush. For now, the other clans should know this land was theirs. Frogleap watched her, his pelt prickling uneasily. Perhaps we should wait for ThunderClan to search for WindClan before we start marking, he mewed.
ThunderClan needs to know they can't push us around, Leopardfur told him.
But Crookedstar told us to stay low.
I'm leader right now, she mewed. If Crookedstar wants to let the land fall into the paws of the other clans when he's recovered, that's up to him. But I'm thinking of Mosspelt, and you should too. I'm not going to let a queen go hungry just to appease ThunderClan.
Frogleap dropped his gaze, but his pelt was still rippling along his spine. Leopardfur pushed on through the heather, her nose twitching as fresh scent surprised her.
ShadowClan?
So they were hunting here. She didn't know whether to feel irritated that she had to compete with them or relieved that Nightpelt was sticking to the alliance. She ducked along a heather tunnel and slid out into the sunshine, where a grassy clearing opened on the hillside. A dark pelt shadowed the bushes a few tail lengths away. She bristled, giving the rest of the patrol a warning glance as they filed out behind her. It's ShadowClan, Frogleap mewed, glancing toward the cat. As he spoke, the warrior called out. Leopardfur? She recognized the gray pelt of Wetfoot, a ShadowClan warrior, as he hurried to meet her. Two other ShadowClan warriors and an apprentice were watching from the heather behind him. We've seen WindClan cats, Wetfoot told her. Leopardfur's belly tightened. Had WindClan returned already? Where? Over there. Wetfoot nodded upslope, where bracken covered the steep hillside. We were going to warn you before we went back to camp. Is WindClan back? Leopardfur flexed her claws. Their camp is still deserted, Wetfoot told her. And there are no WindClan scent markers on the ShadowClan border. There aren't any on our border either, she told him. I think it's just a few stragglers. Wetfoot glanced upslope again and stiffened, his hackles lifting. She followed his gaze. The bracken was rustling a little way up. She could see pelts moving between the stalks. No more than 4, she guessed. Follow me. She bounded toward them. Her patrol raced after her, Wetfoot at her heels. The other ShadowClan warriors slid from their hiding place in the heather and followed. She crashed through the bracken, WindClan scent strong in her nose now. Anger pulsed in her paws. WindClan had abandoned their land. If they'd run away, they should stay away and not sneak back like scavengers and steal food from RiverClan's mouths. She could see 3 WindClan warriors through the bracken now, bunched together like fish hiding in weeds. They began to run. She smelled their fear scent and chased them. They burst from the heather into sunlight, and she raced out after them, pushing harder against the earth, swerving to overtake them and block their escape. They slithered to a halt as she faced them. They were skinny, their eyes round with panic. One of them held a plump vole between his jaws. Black Claw and Beetlenose exploded from the bracken with White Claw and the Shadow Clan warriors. They fanned out around the Wind Clan patrol. Only Frogleap hung back, ears twitching as he watched the Wind Clan warriors huddle defensively in the middle of the clearing. "What are you doing here?" Leopard Fur stalked toward them. She recognized Stagleap, an old Wind Clan warrior, and 2 younger cats. Stagleap returned her glare. "This is our land," he growled. "What are you doing here?" He glanced fiercely at the Shadow Clan and River Clan patrols, but Leopard Fur could see fear sparking in his gaze. He knew he was outnumbered. She padded closer and turned her attention to the young she-cat holding the vole. "Your clan left its territory," she snarled. "It's our hunting ground now." She turned toward Wetfoot. "And Shadow Clans." The Wind Clan she-cat glanced nervously at Stagleap. "Don't worry, Sorrelshine," Stagleap reassured her. "The moors belong to Wind Clan." Leopard Fur looked casually up the slope. "It doesn't look like it," she mewed. "It looks like you're alone here. Wetfoot says your camp is deserted, and there are no markers on the borders, which means this land belongs to any cat who wants to hunt here." Stagleap's tail began to lash. "We want to hunt here," he hissed. She blinked at him, then thrust her muzzle close to his. "We're not going to let you." The young gray and white Wind Clan Tom bristled. "But it's our territory!" "It used to be." Leopard Fur didn't even look at him. She kept her attention fixed on Stagleap. "So I suggest you leave." Black Claw growled behind her. "Why are you even here?" White Claw puffed out his chest. "Did your clan leave you behind?" Stagleap eyed them angrily. "We chose to stay behind," he mewed. "This is our home." "Your home is with your clan." Leopard Fur showed her teeth. "Go and find them." With a snarl, she swiped her claws across Stagleap's nose. He staggered back, fury burning in his gaze, and started to lift his paw, his claws glinting in the sunlight. But the gray and white Tom darted in front of him. "Come on, Stagleap," he mewed. "Let's go. This isn't a fight we can win." He glanced around the warriors encircling them. Stagleap looked at him. Then finally his tail drooped. "Okay." He turned and began to head over the grass. The gray and white Tom padded after him. As Sorrelshine began to follow, Leopard Fur cleared her throat. "Leave the vole," she growled. Sorrelshine stared at her, her eyes glittering with surprise. "Leave it," Leopard Fur ordered. Stagleap blinked at his clanmate. "Leave it," he told her gently. "We can find other prey." "Not on the moor." Leopard Fur dug her claws into the ground. She was already sharing prey with Shadow Clan. She wasn't going to give up more to these rogues. They weren't even loyal to their own clan. "I want you to leave and never return," she hissed. "This is our land now." The hunt went well. Prey was plentiful and easy to catch. The cover of heather and bracken made it easy to stalk unsuspecting mice and voles, and it was easier to chase down rabbits on the open grassland. Leopard Fur had given the Wind Clan warrior's vole to Wetfoot and thanked him for his help, secretly hoping she wouldn't see too many more Shadow Clan patrols here. Shadow Clan must already be fat on the prey they'd taken from River Clan territory during the last moon. The more prey River Clan caught here, the less they'd have to take from the already depleted supplies in the river and along the shoreline at home. Frogleap was sulking. The dark looks he threw her as they carried their catch home made her pelt burn with irritation. At last, in camp, she dropped her rabbit on the fresh kill pile and turned on him. "What's your problem?" He met her gaze steadily, but she could see anger in it. Was that really the right thing to do? "What?" she demanded, even though she knew. "They were Wind Clan warriors," he snapped. "The moor is their home." "Was their home," she snapped back. "Wind Clan gave it up. That doesn't mean we can hunt there and they can't." His tail lashed behind him. She narrowed her eyes. "Why are you so concerned about every clan but your own?" If he didn't care about his own kits going hungry, then she would care for him. Because those Wind Clan cats are warriors, just like us. They don't deserve to starve any more than we do.
That's their problem, she growled, not ours.
His tail fell still. Oh, Leopard Fur. The anger suddenly left his eyes, and he stared at her sadly. You're not the warrior I hoped you'd become. His words stung like nettles, but she held his gaze, refusing to flinch.
Thanks, StarClan, I'm not.
This was for the best. She'd given him up, and he'd chosen Mosspelt, and now Mosspelt was having his kits. It didn't matter whether he liked her or not. Her duty was to protect the clan. And yet the pain in her heart seemed to snatch her breath. She glared at Frogleap as he padded away, trying not to tremble. Leopard Fur? White Claw's quiet mew made her turn. The young Tom was standing beside her. He's being unfair, he nodded after Frogleap. He doesn't realize that you only do these things for the good of the clan. His words soothed the sting in her heart a little. She blinked at White Claw gratefully. Thank you, she mewed. I'm glad some cat understands me. When it all works out, every cat will see you were right. He straightened as though he'd suddenly remembered something. Mudfur told me to fetch you, he mewed. He wants you in the medicine den. She tensed. Is Crookedstar okay? White Claw glanced toward the medicine den. He didn't say, he mewed. He just wanted you to come. Quickly. Thanks. Was Crookedstar worse? Leopard Fur hurried across the clearing, trying to keep her fur smooth. She didn't want to alarm her clanmates. She ducked into the medicine den. Is something wrong? Mudfur was crouching beside Crookedstar's nest. He wants to speak to you. Leopard Fur crossed the den, her heart sinking as she saw Crookedstar's matted pelt. The River Clan leader was lying stiffly on the reed bed, and for a moment Leopard Fur wondered if she was too late. How many lives did Crookedstar have left? Panic fizzed beneath her pelt as she realized she didn't know. What kind of deputy am I? She wondered, looking from the leader to Mudfur. How can I be ready to be leader when I have no idea how close I am? I've given him every herb I know, Mudfur mewed softly. But the fever won't break. But he's alive? Yes. Mudfur touched his paw against Crookedstar's shoulder. She's here, he whispered. She came like you asked. Leopard Fur leaned closer. As River Clan's leader lifted his head and blinked slowly at Leopard Fur, Mudfur straightened. He's very weak. He moved out of the way. Don't tire him. Okay. Leopard Fur slid into her father's place. As Mudfur left the den, Crookedstar stared at her, his eyes bright with fever. She could feel the heat pulsing from his pelt. She remembered the last time she'd been called to the medicine den like this. Sunfish had asked her to take care of White Claw, and then she'd died. She ignored the twinge of grief that pricked in her chest. What did you want to speak to me about? Leopard Fur. He seemed to brighten as he recognized her. Thank you for coming. Of course I've come, she mewed quickly. I was worried you'd be busy. His mew was husky. He shifted in his nest, and the effort of it seemed to pain him. He hesitated, catching his breath. I'm glad you're such a strong deputy, he mewed at last. River Clan will have need of you. Don't talk like that. He sounded like he didn't expect to recover. They have you, and they will for many moons. Leopard Fur's heart ached. However many lives he did have left, surely this sickness couldn't take every one of them. It's okay. His gaze fixed on her. I know I'll be leaving the clan in safe paws, he mewed. I knew I'd made the right choice when I chose you as deputy. We may not always have agreed, but I know you share the same love for our clan as I do, and that you will sacrifice anything to protect it. His gaze drifted past her, glittering now as though the fever was tightening its grip. His eyes widened as though he saw something, and she followed his gaze, wondering if she should call Mudfur. He was staring at nothing. I knew I'd made the right choice, he mewed again, even though Mudfur told me to choose a different cat. Leopardfur froze. Did Crookedstar know what he was saying?
Mudfur did what?
I don't know if he was frightened for you or for the clan, but I told him you were the best choice and the strongest warrior and the bravest.
Leopardfur was hardly listening. Her thoughts were whirling. Her own father had advised Crookedstar to choose another cat to be deputy? How could he? Why? Did he have so little faith in her? He was the one who had told her she would save RiverClan. Had he never really believed it? She stumbled to her paws as Crookedstar began to mutter, a look in his eyes so far away that she knew he couldn't see her anymore. She lurched from the den, staring into the leaf-fall sunshine that was glittering on the water beyond the reeds. She let it dazzle her, feeling numb. Mudfur hurried to meet her.
How is he?
I think he needs you, she mewed blankly. He slid past her and disappeared into the den. Around the edge of the clearing, her clanmates were sharing the prey she'd brought back from the moor.
So much fur,
Tanglewhisker complained to Birdsong as he picked apart a rabbit. It tastes quite good, Lakeshine told Shimmerpelt, tearing another strip of flesh from a quail. Try some. It's a bit like musky sparrow. Leopardfur padded past them. Her heart felt like a huge stone in her chest, pressing so hard against her throat that she could hardly breathe. She headed for the entrance. She needed to clear her head. Is Crookedstar okay? Whiteclaw trotted after her as she followed the winding path between the reeds. You look kind of shocked. He is very sick. Is he going to die? Mudfur will do everything he can to save him. Whiteclaw's pelt ruffled nervously. What will happen if he dies? I'll become leader. The words seemed suddenly empty. It was what she'd wanted, and yet Mudfur didn't believe in her. The one cat she wanted to impress most thought Crookedstar had made the wrong choice when he'd made her deputy. Whiteclaw was watching her as they reached the river's edge. His eyes glistened with worry. Don't be sad, he mewed encouragingly. Crookedstar will be happy in StarClan, and you'll be a great leader. She looked at him, her heart aching at his kindness. He was looking at her with the eyes of a loving kit. Was this how Sunfish had felt when he'd looked at her? I'm not just sad about Crookedstar, she mewed. There's something Mudfur said. Something... She hesitated. How much should she share? Hurtful. Whiteclaw tipped his head. I thought you two were close. We were at once. Leopardfur swallowed back sadness. Whiteclaw looked at her thoughtfully. Sometimes our parents aren't the ones who understand us best. She looked at him. There was such honest affection in his gaze. She wanted to lick his ears fondly, just as Sunfish used to do whenever he'd done or said anything particularly cute as a kit. She sat down, comforted suddenly by his presence and the soothing chatter of the river. She was being selfish, unloading all her worries on such a young cat. Everything will be okay, she mewed. Crookedstar will recover, and I'll talk to Mudfur. We'll work it out. Even if it wasn't true, it would comfort Whiteclaw. She blinked at him. She should distract him by talking about something else. What's going on with you at the moment? He looked away, as though a thought had made him suddenly self-conscious. What? She mewed. Did he have something on his mind? He stared at his paws for a few moments, his tail fur twitching nervously. I have a crush, he mewed without looking at her. Really? She purred, her heart lifting. Who's the lucky cat? Whiteclaw didn't reply. I promise I won't tell, she coaxed. He looked at her. It's Silverstream. She purred louder. A good choice, she mewed. She's a fine warrior, and pretty too. But I feel so awkward around her, Whiteclaw mewed. It's like she's suddenly from another clan and I don't know what to say to her. Leopardfur thought for a moment. Just tell her how you feel, she mewed. What's the worst that could happen? She could think I'm a mouse brain. Why would she think that? Leopard Fur felt suddenly defensive of the young Tom. You're not a mouse brain. Besides, if she's that mean, why would you like her in the first place? But what if she doesn't feel the same way? Isn't it better to find out instead of wasting time hoping? Leopard Fur could see he wasn't convinced. She went on. She'll have more respect for you if you tell her how you feel than if you hide it, she mewed. And if you truly want your relationship to grow into something stronger, you have to be bold. She nudged his cheek with her nose. You want Silverstream to be happy, right? Of course. Then tell her. And if she turns you down, you'll survive. You're a true warrior. You can survive anything. And it doesn't really matter what she thinks. What matters is that you have the confidence to speak your mind. Really? She saw hope sparking in his eyes. Really? She realized, with a rush of surprise, that she hadn't entirely been speaking to him. Her advice had been for herself, too. What did it matter if Mudfur thought she didn't have what it took to lead RiverClan? What mattered was that she did. She didn't know how many lives Crookedstar had left, or whether he would survive this illness, but she knew that if Crookedstar died, she would be a great leader. And in the meantime, while he was sick, she would show every cat what type of leader she would be. She'd prove Mudfur wrong, and Frogleap, and any other cat who doubted her. Crookedstar had made the right choice when he'd chosen her as his successor, and she'd show them. I am on the right path. She gazed across the river as it churned and frothed downstream. Every cat will see it soon. I am following in the paw steps Star Clan has laid out for me.
Chapter 13.
Greypool, Leopard Fur nodded to the smoky she-cat. Take Otter Splash and Stonefur to the moor to hunt. Can I go too? Shadepaw looked at her hopefully. I've never hunted on the moor, but I've been practicing stalking in the forest. I even chased a rabbit the other day. Did you catch it? Leopard Fur asked. No, but I was close. Shadepaw whisked her dark gray tail. Leopard Fur looked at Stonefur. Is she ready? Shadepaw pushed in front of her mentor. Of course I'm ready, she mewed indignantly. Heavypaw went to the moor yesterday, and I've been training just as long as him. Stonefur's whiskers twitched with amusement. She's ready, he mewed. Okay. Leopard Fur dipped her head. She can join the patrol. Leopard Fur had been awake since dawn. Dreams of chasing elusive prey across the shores and through the reed beds of RiverClan territory had left her feeling frustrated, and she was eager to get on with the day. She'd paced impatiently as her clanmates padded sleepily from their dens, assigning patrols as soon as enough cats had gathered in the clearing. She'd spent the night wondering what the future held for Crookedstar and herself. What Mudfur had said yesterday, that he'd already given the leader every herb he could think of to no avail, didn't sound promising, given how sick Crookedstar had seemed. At the least, Crookedstar would need time to recover, and she remembered what Crookedstar had said about leaving RiverClan in the right paws. If he was sick for a long time, this could be her chance to prove him right. If she succeeded, Mudfur would see that she was good for RiverClan, strong and competent. And when he recovered, Crookedstar would see that she held wisdom too. Perhaps he'd listen to her more often. She'd already sent Softwing with a patrol to mark the ThunderClan border, and Rippleclaw had taken another to fish upstream. Now she was determined that a patrol should hunt on the moor. After yesterday's brush with the WindClan warriors, and knowing that ShadowClan was hunting the same territory, she felt it was important to maintain RiverClan's presence there. Keep an eye out for those WindClan deserters, she told Greypool, as the she-cat led the patrol toward the entrance tunnel. Chase them off if you see them, and don't let them take prey. Frogleap flashed her a look from the edge of the clearing, and she met it. You can spend the day repairing gaps in the camp walls, she told him. Skyheart and Loudbelly can help you. He nodded, his gaze betraying nothing, and she turned to Whiteclaw. She had a special assignment for him.
You and Silverstream will be hunting with me this morning." His eyes widened.
"Me and Silverstream?"
He swallowed. "Remember," she told him, keeping her voice firm but encouraging, "you must be bold and confident." White Claw glanced uncertainly at the warrior's den.
"I don't know if she's awake yet," he mewed. "She was on guard duty last night."
"Only because she was too worried about her father to sleep," Leopard Fur told him. "She'll probably be grateful for a chance to go hunting this morning. It'll distract her." White Claw still looked anxious.
"She might want to stay in camp to be near him."
"Staying near him won't help," Leopard Fur told him. "And he's got mud fur." She wasn't going to let White Claw wriggle out of a chance to spend time with Silverstream, especially now when Silverstream must be feeling anxious. If nothing else, she would need a friend. "Go and wake her. I'll see how Crookedstar is." She fluffed out her fur and headed for the medicine den. Dark clouds were rolling in over the moor, and she could taste rain on the wind. But she wasn't going to let the weather stop her from helping White Claw. Besides, a good leader should patrol as much as her warriors. Her belly tightened as she neared the medicine den. Was Crookedstar worse? He'd seemed close to death yesterday, but he must have made it through the night, or Mudfur would have told her. She tasted dread, imagining another feverish conversation like the one they'd had the day before. What else might he tell me that I don't want to know? But she pushed those thoughts aside, forcing herself to put the clan first. A clan whose leader was gravely ill. Had he lost a life already? Or two? She ducked through the trailing moss, steadying her breath as she prepared for the worst, and padded into the den. Mudfur greeted her with a cheery purr. "I was about to come and find you." Surprise sparked through her pelt. Crookedstar was sitting up in his nest, his eyes bright, not with fever, but with welcome. "Hi, Leopard Fur." There was still a rasp in his mew, but he sounded much stronger. "How's the clan?"
"They're fine."
As sick as Crookedstar had seemed the day before, she wasn't prepared for this speedy recovery. She felt a little dazed. She hesitated. She wasn't going to be leader after all. She wouldn't even be temporarily in charge for much longer.
"I've sent out the patrols."
She wouldn't mention that she'd sent one to the moor. Crookedstar wouldn't approve. Her paws itched with frustration. She wouldn't have enough time to show him that her way was right, which meant she'd be back to apologizing for this and for every decision that didn't match his own. "His fever broke before dawn," Mudfur told her happily. "He's even eaten a little fresh kill." Crookedstar tucked his tail over his paws. "I feel much better."
"That's great,"
Leopard Fur forced a purr. How could she prove to Mudfur that she was a great leader now? Instead, she'd have to go back to being deputy with the memory of Crookedstar's words gnawing at her. Mudfur told me to choose a different cat. Mudfur headed for the entrance. "I'm going to go and check on Mosspelt," he mewed.
"I'm glad you're feeling better."
She padded to the edge of Crookedstar's nest and sat down.
"You seemed pretty out of it when I spoke to you yesterday."
He looked puzzled. "I spoke to you?"
"After I'd returned from patrol."
She searched his gaze, looking for a spark of recollection. Would he remember? "I must have been delirious," he mewed. "Did I say anything strange?"
"No,"
she mewed casually.
"You just wanted to make sure the clan was okay."
"Good." He shook out his matted pelt. "Who's leading the patrols today?"
"Softwing, Greypool, and Rippleclaw."
She hoped he wouldn't ask where she'd sent them.
Good choices, he mewed. Are they fishing in the river?
Rippleclaw's patrol is, she told him. Greypool's hunting land prey, and, she went on quickly, I sent Softwing's patrol to mark the ThunderClan border.
We'd better start marking the WindClan border, too, if ThunderClan wants to bring them back.
Okay.
She gritted her teeth, fighting back an objection. Clearly he was completely resigned to giving up their newly gained hunting rights. No doubt he'd hear about the patrols she'd sent to hunt on WindClan land and lecture her for risking the anger of ThunderClan. She could survive that, but what would he say when he heard that she'd chased WindClan warriors off the moor? She'd deal with that when it happened. Right now, White Claw and Silverstream were waiting for her.
I have to go.
Is something wrong? Crookedstar frowned.
No, she told him. I just promised White Claw and Silverstream I'd go hunting with them.
Crookedstar's eyes lit up. Can you ask Silverstream to come and see me? She must have been worried.
She was, Leopardfur told him. But I've been keeping her busy.
Thank you, he mewed gratefully. But I hope you can replace her on your patrol. I want to spend some time with her. His eyes glistened. Heart sinking, Leopardfur dipped her head.
Of course.
She couldn't begrudge him. He'd come close to being separated from his daughter. But she was disappointed at how quickly she'd lost the chance to prove herself and defend her ideas. Patrols to WindClan would have to be suspended, and now she couldn't even help out White Claw. She padded crossly from the den. White Claw was standing beside Silverstream at the camp entrance, looking like a paw at his first gathering. The rain had arrived, and the camp was already drenched.
Crookedstar wants to see you,
she called to Silverstream. Her eyes glittered with alarm.
Is he worse? He's much better.
As Leopardfur's mew rang across the clearing, Frogleap let go of the reed he was weaving into a gap in the camp wall.
Thanks, StarClan, he mewed.
RiverClan is blessed,
Skyheart mewed beside him. Silverstream was already hurrying toward the medicine den, her eyes narrowed against the rain. As she nosed her way inside, Leopardfur joined White Claw.
I'm sorry,
she mewed. She'd made him nervous for nothing.
Never mind.
He shook out his wet pelt, but she could see he was disappointed.
We'll go hunting anyway,
she told him.
Let's take Piketooth and Sedge Creek.
The two warriors were sheltering beneath the sedge with Volclaw and Reedtail. She called to them all.
Join us for a hunt.
The four warriors hurried across the camp, looking relieved to have something to do. Hunting would keep them warm. She led them out of camp and followed the path to the stepping stones. The smooth rock showed above the surface today, but only just. The river would have swallowed them by the time the patrol returned. She leaped them and headed toward the gorge. There was a beach copse on the way where birds would be sheltering in the trees. They hunted until sun-high and caught a starling and a thrush.
Let's bury these and pick them up on the way back,
Leopardfur suggested. Piketooth blinked at her through the rain. Aren't we heading home?
There'll be good fishing beyond the gorge,
she mewed. White Claw nodded.
When the river's been rough like this, there's usually a few fish trapped below the white water,
he agreed. Leopardfur shook raindrops from her whiskers.
Let's head over the top of the gorge, she mewed. It'll be quicker than going around.
Sedge Creek glanced at the cliff top.
It's a long drop down to the river. Don't worry,
White Claw nudged her teasingly.
I'll catch you if you fall.
She nudged him back.
I don't intend to get close enough to the edge to fall. I won't let any of you fall,
Leopardfur mewed gently. She was relieved that despite the rain, White Claw seemed to have recovered from his disappointment about leaving Silverstream in camp. She headed along the path, following the track as it wound steeply upward. As she neared the top of the gorge, a familiar scent touched her nose. She stopped, her paws pricking warily. What is it? Volclaw lifted his muzzle.
I smell WindClan.
Had the warriors they'd found on the moor yesterday come back? Leopardfur stiffened. There was another scent mingled with WindClan's. Her pelt ruffled.
ThunderClan is with them.
Sedge Creek shifted her paws.
Do you think they found out we were hunting on WindClan land?
Perhaps Stagleap asked them for help, Piketooth mewed. Leopardfur's belly tightened.
It doesn't matter why they're here, she growled. None of them should be on RiverClan land.
White Claw began to head along the cliff top.
We were too soft on them yesterday.
His tail was bushed angrily.
Wait.
Leopardfur narrowed her eyes against the driving rain and hurried after him. He didn't know what he was walking into. It could be an ambush.
Let me go first.
She slid into the lead, glancing back to make sure the others were keeping away from the edge. Despite the wind, the scent of ThunderClan and WindClan was so strong now that there was no doubt it was a joint patrol. Anger pulsed in her blood. Was there no clan that respected RiverClan's borders? She flattened her ears, preparing to confront them. She would give them a chance to explain themselves, but their reason for being here would have to be good. Straining to see through the rain, she made out shadows on the cliff-top path, moving toward them.
"I see them!"
White Claw mewed behind her.
"Let me do the talk."
White Claw pushed past her and pelted ahead.
"White Claw!"
Leopard Fur stared after him. His yowl rose above the wind as he charged at the intruders.
"Follow me!"
She raced after him. Rain battered her face, and she was half blind with it as the shapes of the Wind Clan and Thunder Clan cats sharpened. She recognized their pelts. Fireheart and Graystripe were there with Deadfoot and One Whisker. Her thoughts whirled in confusion. They weren't the Wind Clan trespassers she'd chased off yesterday. Had the rest of Wind Clan already come home? Why was Thunder Clan with them? There was no time to wonder. White Claw leaped for Fireheart and sent him crashing to the ground. Sedgecreek streaked past her and lunged at One Whisker. She dragged him from his paws and raked his ears. Then, grabbing him with her forepaws, she tumbled him over and over, dangerously near the edge of the cliff. Leopard Fur leaped for them, grabbing Sedgecreek's pelt and dragging her back. Sedgecreek let go of One Whisker and turned on Leopard Fur, her eyes widening with surprise as she realized her deputy had pulled her away from the Wind Clan warrior.
"What are you doing?" "I promised I wouldn't let any of you fall."
Leopard Fur nodded toward the edge, where One Whisker was scrabbling to his paws. Her pelt spiked as the Wind Clan warrior leaped for Sedgecreek, slamming into the tabby she-cat and knocking her past Leopard Fur with a snarl. But Sedgecreek stayed on her paws and, rearing, swiped at the Wind Clan Tom's muzzle, landing a vicious blow that sent him staggering. Piketooth and Volclaw were driving Deadfoot back along the path, lashing out at him while he stumbled unsteadily backward, his lame hind paw unbalancing him with every step. Graystripe looked startled as Reedtail leaped for him, but the ThunderClan warrior reacted faster than a snake, batting Reedtail away with a hefty blow. Leopard Fur raced at the Grey warrior, and as Reedtail found his paws, she hurled herself at Graystripe and felt him stagger and collapse beneath her.
"This is RiverClan land,"
she snarled in his ear as she wrestled him to the ground and began churning his belly with her hind claws. He screeched with fury and struggled to kick her off, but Reedtail sank his teeth in the Grey Tom's tail and bit down so that Graystripe screeched again, this time with agony. Satisfaction surged in her chest. This band of intruders had learned their lesson. She loosened her grip. It was time to let them run away. They wouldn't dare put a paw on RiverClan territory again. But a yowl erupted through the rain, and Leopard Fur's pelt spiked afresh. She jerked her muzzle around, her eyes widening in shock as she saw more ThunderClan warriors pounding along the path toward them. Tiger Claw! She recognized the dark tabby's broad head at once. He was leading a second battle patrol toward the cliff top. Willowpelt, Whitestorm, and Sandpaw raced at his heels. Suddenly, RiverClan was outnumbered. Leopard Fur leaped to her paws to face them, but Tiger Claw had already crashed into Volclaw, knocking him away from Deadfoot. The dark tabby grabbed the RiverClan Tom with his forepaws and flung him to the ground. Volclaw rolled and tried to find his paws, but Tiger Claw snapped like a fox at his hind leg and sank his teeth deep into the RiverClan Tom's fur. Volclaw's pelt bushed. He clawed his way across the grass, kicking free of Tiger Claw, and pelted into the bushes in panic. Leopard Fur leaped for Tiger Claw. Before she could reach him, Willowpelt clawed her tail, ripping down to the bone. Pain searing through her pelt, Leopard Fur turned, hissing, on the ThunderClan she-cat and slashed her claws across her muzzle. Willowpelt glared at her with rage and reared, lifting a paw to hit back. Leopard Fur felt alarm flare in her belly. Whiteclaw was grappling with Graystripe. Fireheart and Whitestorm batted Reedtail back down the path. Deadfoot lunged at Piketooth, surprisingly deft despite his lame paw now that he faced only one warrior. Sedgecreek was crouched against the earth, hitting back with desperate jabs as One Whisker and Sandpaw loomed over her. If Leopard Fur and her clanmates were going to get out of here with their lives, she would have to fight like a fox. She leaped for Willowpelt, so fast that the ThunderClan she-cat didn't have time to land the blow she'd aimed at Leopard Fur's muzzle. Slamming her head into Willowpelt's chest, she knocked her flying, then turned to help Piketooth. She'd drive Deadfoot off first, then deal with the others.
"Help, Sedge Creek!" she yelled at Pike-Tooth as she darted past him and hooked her claws into Deadfoot's shoulders. Pike-Tooth whirled away, and she pulled Deadfoot onto his weakest paw, feeling a spark of triumph as he collapsed beneath her. She let him drop. He was as helpless now as a wriggling fish. She lunged for his neck, but before she could give him a bite vicious enough to send him fleeing, claws sank into her scruff. Strong paws jerked her backward, and shock pulsed through her as she turned her head and saw Tiger Claw's eyes glittering beside her cheek. How dare he attack her when he'd acted like her ally? "What in StarClan?" He thrust her viciously to the ground, the full weight of him burying her muzzle into the wet earth. "You see?" His low hiss sounded in her ear as she choked on mud. "I'm prepared to hurt even a cat I admire to protect my clan." Did he think this was a lesson? Rage roared in her ears. Her heart bursting, she dug all 4 paws into the ground and pushed up, every hair on her pelt spiking with the effort. She felt him budge and pushed hard as he tilted to one side, his paws slithering in the mud as he struggled to keep his balance. "I've got him!" She adjusted her weight, pressing her advantage, pushing him further over. She felt him slide from her back and, with a final shove, felt a rush of elation as he thumped onto his side. She was about to twist on her hind legs to slash at his ears when a terrified shriek seemed to make the raindrops shiver around her. She froze. Around her, the battle stopped as every face turned toward the sound. She saw eyes widen in horror, and her breath stopped as she followed their gazes toward the cliff top. Graystripe crouched on the grass, staring over the edge, his pelt bushed. Leopard Fur darted to his side. Dread hollowed her belly, and she stiffened, as though her body knew what her mind refused to imagine. She followed his gaze down the sheer cliff face to the water raging below. A dark head bobbed for a moment in the white water, then disappeared. A yowl ripped itself from Leopard Fur's throat. "White Claw! No!" Chapter 14. Leopard Fur wasn't sure how she got back to camp. She could remember grass beneath her paws, the river tugging at her pelt, her clanmates around her. Sometimes a shoulder had propped her up. At the gorge, Fireheart had tried to make excuses. Graystripe had claimed he'd tried to save the young Tom, but she heard them as though she were behind a waterfall, their voices lost in the roar of her grief. When she found herself back at the camp, she felt so numb that it seemed as though she'd died along with White Claw and was no more than a ghost. And then Beetlenose had asked her where White Claw was, and she could only stare at him. Pike-Tooth had to explain, and as he told the young warrior's father that his kit had died, the shock that had wrapped Leopard Fur so tightly suddenly loosened its grip, and she'd crumbled like a rotten branch, her thoughts dissolving into darkness. She opened her eyes now and saw the medicine den. Starlight was filtering through the walls, and she blinked, puzzled. "Why am I here?" "You needed to rest." Mudfur's soft mew seemed to welcome her back from a long journey. He was gazing into the nest where she was curled, and she stared at him, thinking she should raise her head, but she couldn't. Her body had become like the river, shaped and guided by the earth around it, with no will of its own. "Am I hurt?" she asked him. "Not physically," he murmured. "But not all injuries are physical." She wondered what he meant, but didn't ask. She only wanted to sleep and sleep until what happened at the gorge wasn't the only thing she could think about. She closed her eyes and let herself sink into darkness. "Leopard Fur!" Sunfish's mew brought an explosion of light. She could feel warmth on her pelt, healing the pain she'd been fighting to escape. She opened her eyes and, dreaming still, saw her friend. Sunfish's pelt glowed with stars. Her eyes shone as though moonlight blazed behind them. She had never looked so beautiful. Leopard Fur lifted her muzzle, reaching for the light and happiness that seemed to enfold Sunfish. Then suddenly, she was at the gorge, and Sunfish was beside her, and there, lying on the ground, was White Claw's bedraggled body. It was bloody and battered, pounded by the river so that he was barely recognizable, and his eyes were white and empty. "How could you let this happen?" Sunfish blinked at her. There was no reproach in her eyes, only grief so raw and desperate that Leopard Fur's heart seemed to split in two. "You promised to watch over him." Her eyes reflected the deep, sharp pain Leopard Fur felt. "You promised!" A paw prodded her. Some cat was shaking her shoulder. Some cat who was real. Some cat who was alive. "Is it White Claw?" Was he here? Was he going to tell her it had all been a nightmare? She jerked up her head and blinked into sunshine that was slicing through the den. Volclaw pulled back his paw and looked at her anxiously. It wasn't White Claw. Disappointment snatched her breath. Volclaw began talking. "You have to recover," he mewed. "I know you're hurting, but you can't stay in the medicine den. The clan's hurting too. They need to know you're okay. Patrols need organizing. Heavy Paw's ready for his assessment and—" She watched him talk, but his words seemed meaningless. What did it matter? The clan would manage without her. They might do better if she stayed away. "They have Crooked Star," she mewed emptily. "But you know where prey's been running," Volclaw mewed, "and which borders have been marked. We need you." She stared at him. Why couldn't he leave her alone? White Claw was dead. He'd been killed on her watch, just like his mother and his mentor. It was more than she could bear. "I've made too many mistakes." She thrust her muzzle beneath her paw, closed her eyes, and fled back into sleep. When she woke next, she felt a brittle sense of clarity as she lifted her head and looked around the medicine den. "Frogleap?" She blinked in surprise as she saw him sitting beside her nest. He nosed a dripping wad of moss toward her. "You must be thirsty," he mewed. "Drink from this." He was right. Her mouth was parched and she was hungry too, as though she hadn't eaten in moons. "How long have I been in here?" "Nearly 5 days," he told her. He pushed the moss closer. "Drink." She lapped the moss, relishing the cold water, then sucked it like a kit, squeezing out the last drops with her tongue. White Claw was dead. Her heart seemed to recoil as though clawed by the thought, but the grief didn't engulf her entirely this time. She took a breath and let the pain settle like river mud, leaving her thoughts as clear as spring water. "Why are you here?" She looked past him. "Did Mudfur tell you to come?" "I've been worried about you." His amber gaze was soft. "Why?" She was puzzled. "You must hate me." He blinked at her, surprised. "Why would I hate you?" "It's my fault White Claw died," she mewed. "And I nearly got Mosspelt killed. And your kits would have—" She swallowed. Mosspelt was having his kits. Suddenly all the choices she'd made seemed to have been wrong. She'd been following the wrong path. She should have become his mate and had his kits, and then White Claw would be alive and the clan would be happy. "You didn't kill White Claw," Frogleap mewed. "And you rescued Mosspelt." "But I took them both—" "You took them both on patrol," Frogleap told her. "They were warriors and your clanmates. You did nothing wrong." He was looking into Leopard Fur's eyes now so intently that she wanted to look away. Her heart ached with a new pain. "I should have put love first," she mewed. "I should have kept you by my side. I miss you."
She saw the fur around his neck prickle uncomfortably and felt hot with embarrassment. She shouldn't have said anything. "I miss you too," he mewed quietly. "And I wonder what it would have been like if we'd stayed together." He held her gaze for a moment, then looked away. "But we chose to separate for a reason, and that reason hasn't gone away. I love Mosspelt now, but you'll always be special to me. You must never feel alone." He lifted his chin. "I'll always be here, as your friend." She felt a twinge of sadness, as though he'd pulled her closer and pushed her away at the same time. But after everything that had happened, she should be grateful. She was grateful. She hadn't lost him as a friend after all. He fetched her a trout from the fresh kill pile and stayed long enough to make sure she ate it. When he'd left, she dozed a little, waking after sun-high to eat herbs Mudfur had prepared for her. "Silverstream wants to see you," Mudfur told her as she swallowed the bitter mixture. He nosed a fishtail toward her to take away the taste. Leopardfur lapped it gratefully. "Is she okay?" "She seems a little distracted," Mudfur told her. "I told her you'd see her." He looked at her hopefully. "Will you?" "Yes." Leopardfur felt ready to face her clanmates, if only one at a time and while cocooned in a nest. Mudfur touched his nose to her ear. "I'm glad you're feeling better," he mewed softly. "I've been worried about you." "I'll be okay." She blinked at him reassuringly. "I'm your kit, don't forget. I'm a survivor." He purred and patted from the den. A moment later, Silverstream nosed her way through the moss at the entrance. "Hi." Her blue eyes glittered in the shadow of the den. She sat down beside Leopardfur's nest. "Are you feeling better?" "Yes." She sat up. "Is Crookedstar organizing the patrols?" She nodded. "Timberfur and Piketooth are helping him, but we've been hunting the same places over and over again and prey has been scarce." Leopardfur guessed that Crookedstar was still avoiding the river around Sunning Rocks and probably fretting about sending patrols near the Windclam border. He needed to be reminded that it was unwise to fish the same stretch of river too much. And she knew a few places in the woods that were good for hunting when shore prey was in short supply. She would have to tell him about them. She looked at Silverstream. Her tail was twitching anxiously. Was something else worrying the gray tabby she-cat? "You wanted to see me?" "I wish I'd come to the gorge with you," she mewed guiltily, "instead of staying with Crookedstar." Leopardfur felt a rush of sympathy. She knew what it was like to wonder what would have happened if she'd made different choices. "Crookedstar needed you," she mewed, "and you needed to be with him. He nearly died." She shifted in her nest. Strength seemed to be flowing back to her paws. They itched to be outside. Not even StarClan can change what happened at the gorge. The patrol was outnumbered. Your being there wouldn't have made any difference. It would have just meant another of my clanmates was in danger. She held Silverstream's gaze. "I'm glad you were safe in camp." Silverstream stared at her. There still seemed to be a question in her eyes, something that she hadn't said yet. "What's wrong?" Leopardfur asked gently. "Is something else troubling you?" "I heard that it was Graystripe who—" Her mew trailed away, as though she couldn't bring herself to mention Whiteclaw's death. "You can say it," Leopardfur growled. "Graystripe killed Whiteclaw. He probably organized the whole ambush. I'm going to make him sorry he ever—" Silverstream interrupted. "But I heard that Graystripe tried to save Whiteclaw." Leopardfur's pelt bristled. How had ThunderClan's lies gotten into RiverClan's camp? "Who told you that?" "I just heard that's what he said," Silverstream mewed quickly. "It's a lie!" "Did you see him push Whiteclaw over the cliff?" Silverstream was staring at her. "I didn't have to." Leopardfur forced her paws to stop trembling. "Graystripe was leaning over the edge. It was obvious he pushed him." Silverstream looked away. "I guess." When she lifted her gaze again, the question seemed to have cleared from it.
It's not fair Whiteclaw died. I'm going to miss him. He was a great warrior."
There was an emptiness in her mew, like a dutiful kit reciting nursery rules.
It must be grief. It must be more than she can bear.
Why else would the she-cat sound so cold? Leopardfur wondered suddenly if she should tell Silverstream how Whiteclaw had felt about her. They could have been so happy together. She felt her eyes glisten as a wave of fresh grief swamped her, but she swallowed it back. What good would it do to tell Silverstream that Whiteclaw had had feelings for her? If Silverstream didn't feel the same way, Whiteclaw wouldn't want her to know. And if she did, it would only cause the young she-cat even more pain to think of the future she might have had with him. Mudfur slid into the den. "Let Leopardfur rest," he told Silverstream. Silverstream looked at her.
"She's going to be okay, though, isn't she?"
"Of course." Mudfur waved her toward the entrance with his tail. "She just needs to get her strength back." Leopardfur watched Silverstream disappear through the trailing moss. Her paws pricked. Even if it was grief, there had been something in Silverstream's tone and in her questions that left her with a lingering sense of unease. She couldn't help thinking that there was something the she-cat wasn't telling her. Mudfur padded to Leopardfur's nest. "Do you want something from the fresh-kill pile?"
"Maybe later,"
she told him. She wanted her clanmates to have the first pick of prey before he brought her some. She blinked at him, her heart pricking with affection.
"Thanks for taking care of me,"
she mewed, remembering the last time they'd spoken about her being deputy. He still had doubts that she was right for the job. She'd been so frustrated. But now, for the first time in a long time, Leopardstar felt he might be right. Shame burned beneath her pelt.
"I don't deserve so much kindness."
His eyes widened. "Why not?"
"We all know it's my fault Whiteclaw died,"
she told him, another wave of sadness washing over her.
"Sunfish's kit. I loved him as my own, and I couldn't protect him."
Despair overwhelmed her, but she might as well be honest about it. Frogleap had let her off easy because he was kind. Mudfur would be more honest. Leopardfur knew she must face up to what she'd done, and she was ready. "You're not responsible for everything that happens to every cat," he told her firmly.
"But he rushed into battle because of me."
The memory of him racing ahead to confront the ThunderClan patrol had stuck with her like a fishbone in her throat.
"If I hadn't always been so determined that no clan should trespass on our land, he wouldn't have been so quick to fight."
Guilt wormed beneath Leopardfur's pelt.
"You warned me that I'm always too quick to fight. Oakheart and Crookedstar warned me too."
Her chest tightened.
"I must have taught Whiteclaw to feel the same way, and that's why he died at the gorge."
Mudfur moved closer, fixing her gaze with his. "You taught him how to be a skilled warrior," he mewed. "You taught him how to be brave. And Whiteclaw isn't the only warrior who would have rushed to fight them. Don't forget, ThunderClan was on our land."
"But if he hadn't—"
"If he hadn't, would you have let them pass?" Mudfur asked.
"Is that what I should have done?"
"I can't imagine any deputy letting trespassers go unchallenged." She blinked at him, suddenly longing for forgiveness.
"Perhaps one who isn't as hot-headed as me."
He looked puzzled. "Are you doubting yourself?"
"Why not? You doubt me."
She searched his gaze, longing to see that it wasn't true. He blinked. "No, I don't."
"But you told Crookedstar not to choose me as deputy."
His pelt ruffled uncomfortably along his spine. She went on.
"I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to know that. But he told me when he was delirious with fever."
Mudfur glanced at his paws, his whiskers drooping. "It's not what you think."
"But you did tell him not to choose me."
Leopardstar watched him carefully, waiting for him to respond. It was true, this fact that had hurt so deeply when she'd first learned about it. And now, finally, He would tell her what she'd wondered about since the moment Crookedstar had first said it.
Why?
I did, he conceded, looking up at her. But not because I thought you weren't capable. I've seen how you care for the clan. I've seen your passion and commitment. I still think you'll be a great leader. I haven't forgotten that my vision told me you'd save the clan one day, and I still believe it. But I worry you'll choose to save them through war instead of peace, and I'm scared you'll live to regret it. His words pricked at her. There was truth in them. She'd always been ready to fight for her clan. Perhaps too ready. And so many cats she loved had died. Maybe now it was time to take a breath. She could try making different choices. She blinked at Mudfur.
There is truth in what you say. But Whiteclaw's death has shown me what happens when a warrior reacts with instinct and not reason.
He pricked his ears. Really?
Really, she promised. I may never be as tolerant as Crookedstar, but I never want to feel this way again. I never want to have to ask myself again if I'm the reason one of my clanmates died.
I'm glad, a purr rumbled in his throat. I meant what I said when you were a kit, Leopard Fur. If you can find the right balance between keeping the peace and protecting the clan, I think you'll be one of the greatest leaders RiverClan has ever had. Leopard Fur felt her heart lighten, and a little of her guilt melted away. She'd made a mistake, and the ache of it would always be with her. But her father believed she could change. She'd recover and become stronger. Tomorrow she'd leave the medicine den. She'd let go of the cat she'd been. She'd put reason ahead of instinct, and she'd push away any lingering dreams of a different life with Frogleap. Instead, she'd give her whole heart to being the best deputy she could be. A deputy RiverClan deserved.